On July 2, 2025, a silent but deeply alarming episode lit a new warning sign in the world geopolitics. Flying over the strategic waters of the Red Sea, one of the most watched regions on the planet, a German surveillance aircraft was surprised by something that, at first glance, seemed invisible: a laser beam fired directly from a Chinese warship. It was not science fiction, nor a simple technical error. It was a hostile and calculated act, which put directly the life of the German crew. The aircraft, a Kraft King Air 350 model, was engaged in a patrolling mission under the European Union flag as part of Operation ASPs. This mission aims to monitor the waters of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, regions constantly threatened by attacks by the Houthi extremist group, which often sabotage commercial and military ships that move around. The plane, although operated by a hired civil company, was carrying a trained German military crew. Upon noticing the effects of laser, pilots immediately aborted the mission and returned to the Djibouti airbase as a preventive measure. The reason? The risk of irreversible eye damage and the possibility of failure in sensitive aircraft equipment caused by laser intensity. What could have passed as another operational risk in a conflict zone immediately became a diplomatic scandal. The German government, upon learning of the incident, did not hesitate, considered the attack an unacceptable act, classifying it as a direct violation of international air safety principles. In response, Germany's Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Chinese ambassador to Berlin to give formal explanations. The indignation not only came from Berlin in Brussels. The European Union also called the Chinese representative and publicly condemned what happened as a serious infraction to international law and freedom of air navigation. China's reaction was immediate, but far from conciliatory. At a press conference in Beijing, the spokesman for the Chinese Foreign Ministry denied all accusations. According to him, the facts reported by Germany were in total disagreement with reality, implying that Berlin was lying. The tone of the Chinese answer not only raised the diplomatic temperature, but also added a new layer of tension: the doubt. After all, who is telling the truth? For military analysts, however, this kind of behavior from China is nothing new. There is a worrying pattern drawing. The use of military lasers by Chinese warships has been documented several times in recent years. In 2018, for example, 2 pilots of a United States C-130 plane reported being hit by lasers from a Chinese base in Africa, resulting in eye injury. And in 2022, a similar episode occurred with an Australian Air Force patrol plane over the southern sea of China. Apparently, China has been using this tactic as a form of silent intimidation, a kind of force demonstration that does not involve missiles, bullets, or explosions, but may be equally dangerous. The use of lasers in military contexts has a clear purpose: disorienting, blinding, and neutralizing, even temporarily, the ability of response of the opponents. And when the target is a flight aircraft, the consequences can be disastrous. What is at stake here goes far beyond a simple aborted mission. It is the global security, the confidence between nations, and, above all, the maintenance of order on commercial and military routes that support the geopolitical balance. The question that begins to gain strength behind the scenes of international diplomacy is: how far is China willing to go to consolidate its global influence? And what price is the world willing to pay to avoid even greater climbing? For those who hear about the use of lasers in military conflict, it may seem like a futuristic, almost harmless. But the reality is much more alarming. Military lasers are silent, accurate, and potentially devastating war instruments. And what makes this kind of weapon even more dangerous is precisely the fact that it attacks where the eyes do not see, literally. When a laser is pointed to the cabin of an aircraft on the flight, it is not a joke or provocation. It is an act that can immediately compromise the life of the crew and the safety of the whole mission. In flight, pilots depend intensely on vision, both for navigation and instrument control. An intense and eye-driven light-driven beam can cause from temporary disorientation to irreversible blindness. Military lasers are not like the pointers we know in classrooms. These are high-power devices, capable of causing severe damage not only to human vision, but also to embedded optical and sensory equipment. Patrol aircraft, such as the Kraft King Air 350 used by Germany, have cameras, infrared sensors, and high-precision visual navigation systems. All of these components can be affected by intense exposure to laser beams, compromising the mission and putting the crew at immediate risk. And there is still an aggravation. Lasers attack without warning. There is no alarm. There is no prior detection. The pilot only realizes the attack when it is already being affected. This absence of reaction time transforms any laser incident into a critical moment. A second fraction may be the difference between returning safely or losing control of the aircraft. Given these risks, the practice of pointing lasers against airplanes is considered a serious crime in several countries. Specific laws, both national and international, classify this type of action as sabotage, attempt to aggression, and, in some cases, even as an act of war. The Organization of International Civil Aviation, ICAO, vehemently condemns any type of laser interference in air operations. The United Nations Convention on Sea Law reinforces that all vessels, including the military, must respect the safety of aircraft in international airspace. When a country like China ignores these conventions and repeats this behavior on multiple occasions, the signal sent to the world, of course: we are willing to break limits to ensure presence and influence on strategic zones. The repetition of these attacks can no longer be considered coincidence. It is a consolidated tactic. Since 2017, with the installation of a military base in Djibouti, China's first overseas base, Beijing has been expanding its performance in the Red Sea waters. Officially, the installation serves to support anti-pipeline missions and protect vital commercial routes to the Chinese economy. But in practice, it has been a trampoline for the growth of Chinese naval presence outside Asia. Since then, China has been expanding the use of advanced technologies, including directed energy weapons such as lasers. These equipment offers a new form of dissuasion, which, unlike armed missiles or drones, leaves no visible physical tracks, but are yet deeply provocative. The case with the German plane is only the latest chapter of a series of silent clashes. With each new incident, the tension between China and the West grows. Chinese provocations are repeated mainly in areas of strategic interest: the Southern Sea of China, the Taiwan Strait, and now the Red Sea. These are regions where commercial ships, energy routes, and military supply lines pass. Controlling these points is, in geopolitical terms, to control the future. And that's where the most delicate point of the matter is. China doesn't just want to protect itself. She wants to be recognized and, more than that, feared. The use of lasers, however subtle it may seem, is a way of saying, we are here, and we are not afraid to show strength, even breaking international norms. But this game of intimidation has a cost. The international community begins to realize that silence in the face of these aggressions can be interpreted as weakness. And in this power board, just a false movement, a calculation error, to turn a beam of light into an armed conflict. Severe incident in the Red Sea. A Chinese warship pointed a laser beam against a German surveillance plane on July 2, 2025, during a mission of the European Union's operation. Aborted mission. The German aircraft, Abkraft King Air 350, operated by military crew civilians, was forced to interrupt its mission and return to the base by precaution. Strong diplomatic reaction. Germany considered the act unacceptable and summoned the Chinese ambassador. The European Union also protested, denouncing the violation of security and freedom of navigation. China denies everything. The Chinese government responded by denying the incident and suggesting that Germany lied, generating even more diplomatic tension. Repeated use of laser by China. The video points out that this is not the first time China uses lasers against foreign aircraft, citing incidents with U.S. aircraft in 2018 and Australia in 2022. Real danger of lasers. Military lasers can cause temporary or permanent blindness on pilots and damage onboard instruments, endangering mission and human lives. International crime. Pointing out lasers against aircraft is prohibited by international laws and treated as a crime in several countries and can be seen as sabotage or aggression. Chinese base in Djibouti. Since 2017, China has a military base in Djibouti and has been expanding its presence in the Red Sea to protect commercial routes and increase its naval power. China's growing aggressiveness. The incident reflects China's increasingly assertive behavior in strategic areas, seeking to consolidate itself as a global maritime power. Geopolitical risks. China's attitude raises concerns about international security and regional stability, with video concluding with a reflection on how far the country is willing to show power. And it is precisely this last point that turns a beam of light into a symbol of something much larger. We are facing a silent but relentless dispute by influence and mastery on the most important sea routes on the planet. The Red Sea is not just a hallway for ships. It is a pulsating vein of global trade, linking the East to the West, oil to consumption, and power to diplomacy. China, aware of this, spares no effort to demonstrate its presence. Since 2017, when it established its base in Djibouti, it has been using this strategic position to design strength and discreetly challenge the old owners of the geopolitical board. The use of dissuasive technologies, such as lasers, is a deliberate choice. It is a measured provocation, a constant test to the limits of patience and tolerance of the Western powers. But this strategy also has its risks. In an era where any incident can be filmed, disclosed, and analyzed in real time, it is no longer possible to act with impunity. The world observes, and more than observing, it begins to react. Diplomatic pressures increase. Alliances are strengthened, and the space for errors, especially in regions such as the Red Sea, becomes less and smaller. Behind each laser ray fired, there is a ciphered message. We are here, and we are ready to be heard. The problem is that this silent language can translate into increasingly noisy answers. The incident with Germany, therefore, is not isolated. It is inserted in a broader context of redefinition of powers. China seeks its space as a global power, but does so in its own way, often contrary to international standards and openly challenging the status quo. If the world does not know how to respond with balance, firmness, and clarity, we risk seeing these episodes multiply. And each new laser may not only blind pilots, but overshadow diplomacy and illuminate the way to more serious clashes. In the end, there is a question that echoes between diplomatic corridors and military commands. How far China is willing to go to be heard, and even when the world will tolerate this shadow and light game.